Hey everybody, welcome to the D_Rock_YT channel. All my online streaming friends, welcome back. I've got a special guest tonight. He started a science study line of reasoning, ended up creating the Atomic Biology Institute, ended up writing a book called Darwin's Replacement. This is the first edition, bringing the God of our nations back to our students with a new basic science, and then introduced a second edition with some added authors called How We Are Amazingly Made and Cared For by Our Super Intelligent Creator. And you can see Bergman, McLennan, and Rogers on there.
My king's coming back, that's what I'm banking on. Waiting, celebrate the grace of God with that filet mignon. I'm just saying we came a long way from in the grave to where we're at now. My obituary's a resume, go check my background, boy.
So my special guest is none other than Tom Rogers. I'm going to bring him on the stage right now. Tom, welcome. Can you introduce yourself for us?
Yes, indeed. My name is Tom Rogers. I happen to be the father of Derek Rogers, of whom I'm very proud. And I was a bit of a late bloomer as a Christian. Back in 1987, I finally saw the light and got quite interested because I come from a background in engineering, research, manufacturing, construction. So by nature, I need to know how things are made. And so when I got to know this creator a little bit, I decided I needed to know how he actually builds living things. And there are a few choices, kind of a mixed bag of evolution, theistic evolution, creation science. The Discovery Institute people came up with intelligent design. And so I looked at each one of those fairly carefully and well, I shouldn't say I didn't spend a lot of time on evolution because you can't really avoid it. It's so predominant. But anyway, I prayed for a God job, and I got this doozy to put down as much as I could find out about how this creator of ours actually builds us out of the dust.
That's interesting. We'll go into your background a little bit, and just so everybody knows, this is my dad.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll notice in this first book right here, you've got the hands of God with an atom suspended there. And that's kind of the imagery of what atomic biology is all about.
Mhm.
What's your background for the audience? Like, how did you end up progressing towards this? What's your line of study, all that type of stuff, which brought you to kind of reasoning out biology at the atomic level, which is really what we're talking about here.
Right. Well, I did work for two different engineering outfits, and I was doing a little research. I got married quite young. Did distance learning, which you could do at that time, even for engineering. I did work for the city of Vancouver and the engineer, and so I started down that road. Didn't like the way there were a lot of restrictions. Also, that engineering wasn't that interesting. So I moved to another engineering company that builds these big, huge grain terminals on the waterfront here on the coast. And that was just 180 degrees difference. It was really fascinating work. But I also got into some property work for investments, and that did very well. And as it turned out, I was able to build quite a large home and retire at age 31. And I got there by being a hard worker, actually too hard to a fault. And anyway, I went from that into some construction and then manufacturing, and all of these things, looking back, seem to be preparing me for figuring out how things are made, including living things. So when I finally became a Christian, thanks to some prayers from you as a young person, because you
God
began
answers prayers.
There was absolutely, and as with some people, they have to be broken a little bit, and I had lost a lot of money because of what OPEC was doing with oil prices. But anyway, that's when I got my spiritual life sorted out and met this creator, and then started learning how much he does for us every second of every day. And it's really fascinating. It's absolutely remarkable. And I think that if more people knew this, and this is what we hope to do, is to teach people and get into the public education system, which is going to be really difficult to get past evolution. But we're going to try to emphasize the truth of this super intelligent work.
We'll go into more details on that. I've got the website up here. So this is atomicbiology.com, and just kind of goes through revealing the true origin cause of life. There's the book on there, so people can purchase the book, and also donate on here. And there's a video that kind of presents the basics of what atomic biology is. This is not necessarily creation science, which is what everybody might think it is. You kind of straddle a line between creation science and intelligent design, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
why don't you just tell us what is atomic biology?
Well, there is something that I learned in grade 5, and that was that atoms are the building blocks of the universe. And when you look at it closely, that's absolutely right. Every material thing is made out of atoms. And we have biology studies that go to the molecular level, but they haven't gone to the atomic level. And I think there's a very strong reason why. The evolutionists have such a powerful hold on biology education from the top down that nothing besides evolution at the moment is allowed to be taught as the cause of life in the Western world. And
Yeah.
and that is a problem, because that's not science. As soon as you close the door to one avenue of investigation, you're not doing proper science anymore. But they don't want to go in the other direction. And I have
Yeah, they would say the opposite is true, that if you bring God into it, it's not science anymore.
Yes,
and which is, it's funny because if there is a God, which we believe there is,
mm-hmm.
then to ignore him, you've lost all thread of reasoning.
Yes,
so,
well, of course they don't see that. But here's a final conclusion, Derek, and it took quite a while to get to this stage where the evidence was so clear and so solid that it's really, like, I don't know how you can dispute what I'm going to say here now. The first kind of breakthrough was in 2016 when the 3 Nobel Prize winners in chemistry, after working for 33 years to try to make a single molecular machine. Now, our bodies have about 40 different types of molecular machines in our 200 and so different types of cells
that we know of so far, right? I think they're still discovering some of those things.
That's right. So we don't know how much beyond that it'll go, but so anyway, they got the Nobel Prize for developing these minuscule. Of course, all molecular machines are minuscule, but I mean, it was simplistic. That's what I really mean. They were so simplistic compared to the ones that are built into our cells that there's really hardly any comparison. First of all, they don't live; they have no life of their own. They have to be stimulated with something like ultraviolet light. It took horrendous work and intelligence, sophisticated equipment to make even these, and they're almost infinitely more simplistic than the simplest molecular machines built in here every day of the week. Okay, so that was one item that showed that it takes a lot of intelligence to make molecular machines. But more recently, and this isn't brand new. This has been going on for about 70 years. Scientists have been trying to make a living cell out of
Yeah.
elements for about 70 plus years. Cannot come anywhere close. So what does this tell us? It means you need more intelligence than our scientists have, right? Isn't that pretty obvious? We don't have enough intelligence, so it takes a greater intelligence, and we're calling that super intelligence. And we've called this atomic biology because we go to the atomic level, because our food has to be made out of atoms in the dust, in the soil of gardens and fields and orchards and so on.
So I think that's a key difference here. You know, a lot of creation arguments are looking at the past and how things have come about and how adaptations have taken place, and there's, you know, obvious intelligence behind that. You're actually looking at atoms not in the past. You're looking at what's happening right now in our bodies, in all biological matter.
That's right.
Things that are just unfathomably intelligent in what they do, the functions they perform, and how they come about. Can you go into a little bit more details on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. First of all, they don't form, like these molecular machines don't form by themselves. They're very, very sophisticated in the atoms that have to be selected. Let's start with the atoms in, or the molecular structure in our foods. Okay, so for our potatoes and carrots and peas and strawberries and so on, that are made out of dirt. So the right atoms and the right numbers of the right atoms have to be found in the dirt, sorted, selected in sequence, precisely placed and hooked up to make every molecule for every cell in our foods. Let's take a potato, for example. So it's made out of dirt. And then we eat the potatoes, and our new cells, our replacement cells, and so on, are made out of the foods that we eat and the atoms in the foods that came from the dust. So we're made of dust as well in a two-step process. Atoms in the soil to our potatoes and peas and carrots and everything else that's grown for food. And then from using the same atoms, which have to be resorted, reselected, counted, precisely placed and hooked up. And that takes an intelligent builder. So we don't have a common ancestor, we have a common builder. Okay, and here's where we go beyond my friends, and I like the guys at the Discovery Institute and their intelligent design, but they have been reluctant for 25 years to even mention God by name, because in the States, this misinterpretation of the separation of church and state, which was just in a letter from Jefferson, really. It's not by law. And Jefferson talks about the creator of men being equal and so on. That's been misinterpreted. Now, it's understandable that they don't want the church to control the government, and they don't want the government to control the church. So that's the separation. But God is a huge part of the government. He's in. Let's take the Americans in particular. We have the same in Canada for a lot of the same things, but the celebrations of Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, the God in the justice system, God in the motto of the United States, "In God We Trust." He's on war memorials, on public buildings, justice system, and on and on. God is a part of the government, a highly recognized part of the government. Now, God is getting very fuzzy now because of this 6 decades since early '60s. So I'll talk about where things got right off the tracks, like a train wreck.
Okay, hold
Okay.
that thought.
Okay.
Couple things came to mind when you were talking there. One is that Western civilization is in a weird moment right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all our laws, our governments, the building of our countries, you know, the evil colonization that you know it's been framed in a distorted way, all has its roots in Judeo-Christian principles, with our laws being founded on the ultimate supreme authority, right? God.
Mm-hmm.
God's the ultimate judge, and that's where our concept of justice and freedom and all these things come from, and the sanctity of life, and
I want to
so
jump
many
in just
things.
for a second there. I just want to jump in just for a second on that point, because the first line of the Canadian Constitution says, "Whereas Canada is founded on principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law." Then it goes on to our Bill of Rights. But first line of the Constitution recognizes the supremacy of God. Okay.
Yeah, and in the States, it's the same, right? And
yes, now God is not in the Constitution, but he's certainly in the Declaration of Independence, right. Pledge of Allegiance, it's in the motto, and they realize down there they've got to get back to it, so they're actually putting the 10 Commandments back up into classrooms and hallways in some of the states. Right. So they know we've got to get back there because we're getting right out of control here.
Yeah, we can go into some of the things going on with the recent conflict in the Middle East, and just the change in perspective that's happening. It's like we're forgetting where we came from so quickly. Mm-hmm. But anyways, going back to atomic biology, something else you said was you went back to the dirt and how atoms are formed in the dirt, and they're assembled, and then they're assembled into the food that we eat, and they're assembled into our bodies. And this is on an ongoing basis, right? Our bodies break them down and then reassemble them as needed. So that's interesting, just in terms of everything coming from the dirt and how that also relates back to the Bible, right?
And
we're formed from the dust.
Yes, indeed. We have a strange situation, Derek. And I've just started doing this because we have some Christians in science that have associations. Intelligent Design people, Discovery Institute, they're in that vein. But there's things like the American Scientific Affiliation, the Canadian Scientific and Christian Affiliation, that, you know, they're scientists and theologians together in these associations, but they have to bring in evolution as well. So they've got theistic evolution. Right. And to me, that is such a paradox, because the dominant definition of evolution, as taught widely across all our public education and up and through universities, or maybe starting universities top down, that there's almost a fear because professors have lost their jobs because they dared to suggest there might be some intelligence in the way living things are made. Not
Yeah.
just a rap on the knuckle. Don't say that to your class again. You are out of here.
Yeah.
And and there's a whole documentary made about that with
Expelled you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No intelligence allowed. Right?
Yeah. And definitely within the scientific institutions, scientists that step away from Darwinism have traditionally in the past been removed from their places of authority, taken out of their positions if they're professors, all that type of stuff. So what's happening now? Is that kind of changing?
Well, it's gradual now. Truth be known, Darwin came out with his first book on evolution in 1859, but it wasn't really until the early 1960s, so like over 100 years before it really took hold. And somebody said that science changes one funeral at a time as the old guard dies off. And unfortunately,
and that's interesting because that was long before DNA was discovered and any kind of idea of how complex basic cells are.
Let me touch on that point, Derek, for the DNA. Okay, here's how precise. For example, the 4 bases of DNA have to be made out of atoms. Okay, let's take guanine and adenine. Adenine is 5 atoms of carbon, 5 atoms of hydrogen, 5 atoms of nitrogen. That's what it takes to make one base called adenine. Guanine is 5 atoms of carbon, 5 atoms of hydrogen, 5 atoms of nitrogen, 1 atom of oxygen. That's the only difference between those 2 bases. And there's only 4 bases. So you can see how precisely the atoms have to be in our bodies. They have to be taken from a blood vessel adjacent to the particular cell where these atoms are going to be used to build the molecular machines and the DNA and so on. And they have to be precisely sorted, selected, counted, and hooked up together in sequence as needed. And you can't, like, you've got a blood vessel under pressure right next to the cell. So it's got to be a very highly regulated little gate to allow the right atoms out of the bloodstream to come in, because you can't have an open gate and all goes flooding in. You'd have chaos inside the cell. So it has to be very tightly controlled. So that's just about the precision. So there's 4 bases, and they're all fairly similar in the type of atomic structure. Okay, but then there are about 6 billion of these bases arranged in pairs just to make one strand of DNA.
Amazing.
They have to be in sequence. And this helix that was discovered in 53 that forms the DNA strand has them in one order on one side, the opposite order on the other side of the helix. And it's just amazing. Now, I've got to backtrack a little further to another question you brought up, and that was between creation science and atomic biology and intelligent design. So I think all 3 are quite legitimate. The creation science is heavily tied to the Bible, okay?
Right.
And this is part of the American system, especially, and it's not just America, Canada's the same, where the Bible at the moment isn't something that's used for teaching at all, okay? It's purposely kept away from the students. So that's an issue if you want to get into the public education system. intelligence design have, like I say, been avoiding mentioning God by name for the first 25 years of their existence. The last year, they finally came out with a book called The Return of the God Hypothesis. That's how reluctant they are to give God the credit in the
Right.
education system. And we say, fellas, God is a big part of the government since the beginning. You know, don't rule them out like that. That's ridiculous. And if the evolutionists try to tell you that that's religion, then the government's a church, and nobody's going to believe that
Yeah.
these days. That's for sure. So we go a couple of steps further than the intelligent design people. Number one, we don't just talk about the design, because if I'm an engineer with a good design, now what? I've got to build whatever it is. And the thing with engineering is that you have to be way past theory, because the bridge has to stand and the plane has to fly. Theory isn't good enough. You've got to have the
Yeah.
facts. And so
Engineers do the heavy lifting on so many
we go
things.
beyond design to the construction part, and we go deeper than molecules down to atoms, because they're the building blocks. So that's the difference. And we don't make reference to the Bible, but we certainly make reference to God, okay? Because God's part of the government, and that's why we are not afraid at all to bring him into the picture. And when you find out the kind of work that he has to do to keep us alive, to build us in the first place, and then maintain us, it's so mind-boggling, the incredible perpetual care that he gives everybody every second of every day, actually.
Yeah, actually, this point that I think you're about to bring up, I have mentioned this a few times to people, because there's a verse in the Bible that says God's mercies are new every morning, and we may have had a bad day yesterday, but today is a new day.
Right.
So it just helps people keep propelling forward in the right direction instead of getting bogged down in endless navel gazing. But the point that you're going to bring out really sticks it, I think, which is exactly what is happening in the human bodies every second of every day.
Yeah.
Which just shows God's mercies are new every second, right?
That's absolutely right. And first of all, the theory of perpetual motion is really non-existent without the application of energy. Okay, to keep something moving perpetually, energy has to be at a controlled level. Now, the electrons in our atoms are moved perpetually and have been forever. So they have to have a supply of very highly controlled energy. They have to have that energy added. So that can only come from a God, a super being, a super intelligent being. So if God is in fact in a form of presence in every atom to move the electrons at the right speed so they don't fly off into orbit and they don't crash into the nucleus. They have to be moved at the right, just like your planets, have to be going the right speed so they don't fly out of orbit or crash into the sun. There's fine tuning in the universe, but there's fine tuning in atoms as well. So
there's a lot of power there.
Yeah, there is.
From the atomic bomb.
Absolutely incredible power that we don't realize.
So just going back to what's happening every second of every day, can you just do a little run through within the common or average human being, what's happening?
Okay. The one thing that really boggled my mind about 20 years ago, Derek, was that I was looking at red blood cells, and a fellow by the name of Pallister says that, and of course lots of other blood experts know this, our red blood cells have to be replaced about every 120 days because they wear out from absorbing the oxygen from the air we breathe in and carrying the carbon dioxide from our blood to exhale. Okay. Within 120 days, the red blood cells are not efficient at doing that anymore, so they have to be replaced. So Pallister figured out, okay, for a 150-pound male, as an example, he needs about 2.3 million new red blood cells every second. Then a fellow by the name of G.J. Tortora says that every red blood cell has about 280 million molecules of hemoglobin. Okay.
Yeah.
Then Max Perutz, the late Max Perutz, had found that each molecule of hemoglobin has about 10,000 atoms. Somebody since then has narrowed it down to about 9,200 specific. But the math tells us that this 150 pounder needs about 6,400 quadrillion correct atoms per second just to make his replacement red blood cells. And then there's another 80 trillion cells in the average body that need to be repaired, maintained, replaced occasionally as needed, and they go at different speeds. Like the red blood cells, 120 days. Taste buds, 5 days, and they have to be replaced.
Wow.
In our book, you've read, but we show one of God's kinds of evolution. Okay, where he takes a fuzzy worm.
Yeah.
And he turns it into a beautiful flying butterfly. That's macroevolution, but 14 days, not millions of years, 14 days, and he can make that change. And
yeah. Metamorphosis.
Yeah, and that's what the evolution say. Oh, that's just metamorphosis. Oh, just metamorphosis? That's macroevolution and jig time. So
yeah, that's true. All that being said, I mean, it's mind-bogglingly amazing and fast how all this happens. We don't even see it. We don't know about it. We ignore it because we have no idea. What have you come across some objections? Just looking at things from the atomic level and reasoning that there must be intelligence or super intelligence behind all this. What's kind of the main objections to that?
Okay. Well, people aren't prepared to take it because they've been bathed in evolution since the 60s, 1960s. Okay. And so that is why I believe we're now experiencing this, what a Canadian group is calling the hemorrhaging of faith. People are losing their faith and moving out of the church in droves, which is a shame for society altogether. It's too bad. You can talk so much about that itself and the implications. Not that we haven't been warned, because God has told us in his word that we're coming up to this great tribulation, and things are really going to get messy. And there's going to be these false teachers in the end times. Well, guess what? We've got false teachers, and evolution is one of the worst things. And I'd really like to read some information from a honest evolutionary biologist, okay, from Harvard. This is Richard Lewontin, Harvard evolutionist professor. Says we take the side of materialist science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just so stories, because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, that we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated, but moreover, that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. You see?
Yep.
Now,
That
who's
says it all there,
behind
doesn't
that
it?
sort of thing, if not Satan himself, public enemy number one?
That's a huge wall to that's not an uncommon thought process in today's mainstream sciences.
But
So,
it's this. There's a fear out there, Derek. There's a fear of the evolutionary hierarchy, and like we mentioned earlier, a number of professors have been fired. And you better toe the line, or you won't get your funding. And
yeah,
there's a lot of consequence for not buying into that theory. The theology is it, and they don't want to call it a theory anymore. Here's a bit of a conversation with a Christian in science from one of these associations, and I brought up this fact that isn't it true that scientists cannot make one living cell? We don't have enough intelligence. Isn't that true? So he didn't say much about that. Then I brought the next step. So doesn't that mean that it takes something more intelligent than man to make a living cell? And doesn't that mean that the only entity that we know of that has that much more intelligence than we have is our creator? And therefore, evolution isn't even in the running because it claims not to need any intelligence at all. And his reaction was, oh, well, it's got to be something more than that. People get this ingrained line of thinking, and to change that is difficult. Now, we're trying to make this a truth. I don't know if you can see this little card here, a truth for life education, okay? With a bit of our similar heading to our website. What we're going to try to do is emphasize what the truth is. Don't we all want to get to the truth? If you're not trying to get to the truth, you're not really doing science. Okay.
right.
So if we can get some cooperation from at least some of the media to spell this out, that here's the truth of what it takes to make living things, including us. Do teachers not want their legacy to be that they taught truth rather than sticking to an untruth, a lie that they've been dictated to teach? And we're hoping that enough teachers will say, no, we're not going to lie to our students. We want the truth. And this looks more true than evolution by a long shot. So hopefully that line of work will help.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle for sure. I mean, there's been court cases that just reject any possibility of.
Their leap is that they think anything involving God is religion. God's part of the government. Government's not a religion. So don't assume that God is religion. They're separate.
Right. Yeah. So I have a question then. One of the arguments that would come up against this would be the God of the gaps argument, and that is that by stating that these things appear to be intelligently designed, you are merely creating a God for a gap where science hasn't yet figured out how these mechanisms happen on their own. That over time they will discover something where it's all just natural processes that end up creating this hyperspeed mechanisms. How do you respond to that?
Well, they have tried for over 70 years to make one living cell and can't come anywhere close. And this is in a fancy laboratory with the vast accumulation of scientific knowledge that we have, sophisticated equipment, like unbelievable, and they can't come close. So now relate this fancy laboratory with all this knowledge involved to a microscopic cell that you can't even see with your naked eye, and there can be 40 different molecular machines at work, synchronized in that microscopic cell.
And some of them are irreducibly complex, right? Like
exactly.
They need each other to exist in the first place.
Exactly. That's another thing. Now, Derek, I have to say, some evolutionists are walking away from evolution, okay? Some of them are being brave and honest enough to say, hey, this doesn't happen by chance. We want to show clearly with evidence how much God constantly cares for everybody every second of every day. Today, there's so much depression, anxiety, confusion, even amongst young people that shouldn't have a worry in the world, but they can't figure out whether they should choose a different sex, or they have no idea that there's a superhuman entity that loves them so much. And
what are the goals then? You've created Atomic Biology Institute based around this. You've got other scientists on board with you. I believe you have a board of directors, and you have kind of a vision for what you want to do with atomic biology and the Atomic Biology Institute. Just share a little bit about that. What's the goals and the vision there?
Well, it's been a learning curve. This whole thing has been a huge learning curve, Derek. And the challenge is, like, it's really the scientists' minds that we have to change. And for the most part, they don't want to be changed. So that's a challenge. Hopefully, we're going to be able to enlist the insistence of teachers to have truth as their legacy, not a lie. Okay. Evolution is really a lie. Evolution can't even start building a living cell. Okay. So it's really disqualified as both the origin and the cause of life. Shouldn't even be on the books anymore, but it's going to be there for a long time. The goal is to let students especially understand how much they're cared for. Apparently about 75% of the Christian students that enter university are going to lose their belief before they graduate because of the pressure from the peers and the professors that are leaning towards evolution.
Well, when the other side can't be presented, that only makes sense, right? Um,
Hmm.
they will say that they have the more reasoned approach and that those kids have been brainwashed to believe in God
Hmm.
all their lives, and now they're going to show them in
Oh,
the
yeah.
upper learning universities and
Yeah.
institutions what the truth is, right?
Yeah.
Without any counter arguments.
Yeah. They won't. They
We
won't.
won't allow those.
Yeah. Right.
And you mentioned that more and more scientists are pulling away from
Evolution.
Darwin,
Yeah.
neo-Darwinian evolution. There are the groups like Descent from Darwinism.
Yeah.
Um,
So there's
the
over 1,000 names on that list.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm trying to remember all the different lists. There's a bunch of them across
Now,
the
Bob
world.
Enyart has assembled
Right.
thousands of
Real
names.
Science Radio. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, Jerry Bergman is
Bergman.
part of the atomic biology. Didn't he had The Slaughter of the Dissidents was one of his books, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Jerry's one of our directors, probably the most highly educated microbiologist in the States, if not beyond, with the 1,026 university credits. Okay, it's the equivalent of about 20 master's degrees.
So, what do you need? Like this channel's not very big. I don't have a huge subscriber base, but hopefully it's going to grow, and hopefully there'll be people that share it out to other people. By the way, like and subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends. What does atomic biology need? What can people do to become a part of it? What kind of assistance do you need? Is there people that can maybe jump on and help out in different ways? I'll bring up the site as you talk about that again.
Okay. Well, that would be great if they would have a look at the site, get a little more detail in writing so they can digest it. And we need to build an organization to sell the concept. Basically, we've got to, like.
So looking at the site here, you have the donation. Is this so they can give through here?
Yes,
and also the Canadian donation.
Yes, Canadian donations working. So some money to hire full-time fundraiser is one thing we need, because we've got to do a lot of advertising, and hopefully there are many Christian newspapers and so on, church papers and so on, and we're going to be working hopefully with some church denominations to make an edition of our book specifically for that church. Okay. And Christian schools is another thing, and we've got some allies there. But here in Canada, for example, the Christian schools still have to teach evolution.
So then there's something that maybe from this channel could happen is people can share this video and the information on the website with a teacher that they may know, homeschool organizations.
Yeah.
The important thing here is that people can get involved. They can help out. They can get the word out there. That's probably one of the key things. You've never heard of atomic biology before. If you do a search for atomic biology, you should see the atomicbiology.com website on the first page there somewhere. Although there's other things that are being called atomic biology, which aren't the same thing. People can get involved. They can help out. They can pray for this. Well, appreciate your time, Mr. Tom Rogers. Thanks for coming out. Hopefully we'll have a good view on this video and get the word out there. And
yeah, we're open to suggestions too, Derek, because this is a learning curve. And if any of your audience has some ideas, we have a way of being contacted through the website, and they can contact us by email and share their ideas. And we'd really appreciate that.
Excellent.
I say thank you very much for your time and organizing this conversation. It's been a pleasure.
For sure. And on that note, thank you, the viewers. Please like and subscribe, or it'll be over here somewhere, I guess. Share with your friends, hit the notification bell, let everybody know about this channel. I hope to have more content like this and other related things that are important to our society and life, and our up and down perspective and our side to side perspective with our fellow man. God's got good plans, and he's recently made me kind of change the way I do my channel. So thanks for listening in.